and she have put together really good thematic shows. And when Bonnie emailed me about this gallery show of fine art from local artists, I was floored because I thought this is so cool. And I have to tell you, Bonnie, this interest of mine with the word and the image goes back way far. I searched out when I was a kid. I had somebody sent me a greeting card that was words by John Baldessari.
Mm.
And I thought, who is this guy? I gotta know him. I was a kid. And I ended up knowing somebody who knew where his studio was in LA. And we went to visit his studio, this friend of mine, I was ancient history, and he had words and images all over the ceiling. And I mean, it was just an amazing thing for me because I mean, I love words, love all kind of words, love to write, and then I love art. And the fact that, John Baldessari was this master at combining the two.
Mhm.
Then later on in my life, must have been almost 30 years ago, he did, maybe you'll remember this. John Baldessari did the staging, decor, curatorship of the Magritte show at LACMA.
Oh, that was before my time. Yeah.
Yeah, yes, this was I was maybe out of grad school, something like this, but John Baldessari did this amazing set, and curated the show, Magritte show. And can you believe it? So some of these things, they stay with you all your life. So
Hmm.
a friend of mine and I booked a hotel. We came to see the show. We wanted to stay for the after party, etc. And we walk into the show. It was opening night. I don't know how I got lucky, but I found a way to get into the show. And somebody had decided, and it's a little bit of sacrilege, but boy, did it work. Somebody decided it would be fun and also very Magritte to take full-on gallon bags of ladybugs, live ladybugs,
Wow.
and put them in the various rooms of the gallery at LACMA.
And
And
what?
as the evening progressed, ladybugs were all over the walls and the
Oh my
people. and
God.
and John Baldessari had done the roadmap of LA interchanges on the ceiling, and they were all on the ceiling of his roadmap. And I'll never forget that. So when I saw you were doing the show about the word and images, I thought, oh, this is too good. I've got to have Bonnie on the air with some of her artists. So first, I want to introduce who's with me. Cynthia Martin. I have interviewed her so many times because she's always doing something interesting. I've been to her shows. From the first I saw her work, I think it was on Adams Avenue. You showed at, or on State Street. You showed at I was back in San Diego when I knew John Baldessari right then, Adams Avenue. When you actually showed at a little gallery that was, oh, I forget
Reynolds
what it
Gallery.
was. What was it, Cynthia?
Well, 3 years ago, it was Reynolds Gallery with my group Western Edge. Could that have been?
Before that, way before that.
Oh, my.
Who
Uh,
represented you way long time ago? Like almost 20 years ago.
oh, gosh. Oh, yes. The frameworks when it was on De La Guerra,
That might have been
perhaps.
it. Yep.
Yes, I did a show there with text. Yes, yes.
Yes, and I remember seeing your work like almost 20 years ago at a small little place, and I thought, oh, I'm going to keep track. Yeah, I really liked what Cynthia did. She's an alumnus of the University of California, Santa Barbara. She taught as well. And she's been an award-winning artist and writer and art educator. As we have found out, I've seen her in solo shows and group shows all over town. She's on the board of the Abstract Art Collective and the Santa Barbara
Was,
Studio
was.
Artists. Well, you was
I
okay,
was.
was okay. And the Santa Barbara studio artist, and I've had the treat of seeing her studio on one of the tours. She's country art in in Public Places Advisory and on the committee for County Arts Commission, which was renamed Santa Barbara Arts and Culture. member of Western Edge, a group of contemporary women artists, and she's represented now by Rubenstein Chan. The gallerist that we're going to talk to, Bonnie Rubenstein, is representing her. And I've always been kind of astounded with Cynthia's command of the insect world. That has fascinated me for a long time. I've loved things that she does that includes insects for some reason. Love that stuff. Another old friend, Tom Pizderka. Tom, when he was not even out of grad school, he did an MFA show, and I was captivated by his work. And this was years and years ago. And I said to the Art and Architecture Design Museum at UCSB, can I cover your MFA show? And they said, well, we normally don't allow press. You know, it's a show for the students. And I said, but I really love seeing the it's en griselle, fancy word for grays and blacks and whites, of this young artist, Tom Pizderka. Oh yeah, we know Tom. Can I have him on the radio show? And he was not, he didn't have his MFA at the time. He was about to, I guess, defend his MFA in his master class show. So I knew him way back then, and I've always loved his work. He has a marvelous counterculture, very edgy, always it philosophically and politically hooked up newsletter. And his newsletters are fun to read. I've sent them off to some folks over the years. They're insightful. He writes from the standpoint omnipotent narrator, and it works. It's beautiful, and we have known each other a long time. He's now showing nationally, and he's also a nationally known curator. Um, Now,
Okay.
yeah, no, Tom, it's true. What, you know, um, I read with Bonnie's bio of you, it's interesting. I know that I saw your first works that were painted with the ash of the fires in 2016. That's
Yeah.
when I first started to notice the way that you were incorporating dust and soot and ash into your work. And I know you at that time, because I think I interviewed or a show you did, you began to collect the ash, and then you began to burn wood and paint on wood and paint large scale as well. And each fire that we went through brought a whole new aura to what you were doing in your work. And I love that. I also like that you use the words like apocalyptic and eschatological when you write about your work. I mean, you have to have an undergraduate degree in philosophy to say stuff like that. He's actually been a curator for Santa Barbara County. I recommend him as a curator to other little cities and organizations in California. He's interdisciplinary because, as you know, when we introduced him, he talks about art. He writes beautifully about art. And you know, Tom, when I started in school, I was at Tufts University, and I thought I'd be an art major and studio art, and I started there. And one of my professors, I remember it was a collage class, and he said, you know, you just don't have the eye, you don't have the composition. And he said, but I've read your papers over the year. You've been a student here, and I think you write better about art than you do art. And that changed my life. So I thought, okay, I can do things with art, for example, appraising, where the content is mostly verbal. And so I know what it's like to write about art, and you do a beautiful job. Um, you know, some of the works that I envision when I think about Tom are very ethereal. So there's sort of cloud forms and smoke forms and billow forms and round forms, but not really. I mean, on a two-dimensional object. And now he's using earth-based paints and plant fibers. And I haven't seen that work yet. I'm anxious to do that. He's a creativity coach. The Art Process Studio is an online and in-person entity. I've seen him driving around town, and he seems to be counseling folks as he goes. It's a pre works. It's process is important to him, as you can see. But if he's picking up ash and curating plants and this sort of thing, take a look online at the Art Process Studios. I think you'll be impressed. There's two ways of thinking about creativity. One is butt in chair until the muses come down and sit on your head. That's one way. And the other way is to actually engage in the process and just keep plowing on. And that's what I like about the process studio that Tom has actually founded. Janet Brody is here. She writes that she highlights the power of finding her voice through visual art and storytelling. She does painted affirmations, and she invites people to express themselves in 15 words or less through meaningful, reflective art experience. And she has also done a memoir, Sit Behind the Nets, it's called, trying to raise awareness for stadium safety when she lost her mother to a foul ball injury in a stadium. Amazing. Director of Development and Operations for the Grace Fisher Foundation. An artist, published author, podcaster, advocate for anti-ableism. She's married to a deaf partner. And she's passionate about inclusion and empowering to find others to find their creative voice. She is passionate about her motto, elevate life through art. So interesting because some of the new biennales that I follow, I have a client who sends me to Art Basel in Miami to purchase work. And I'm always amazed at the growing importance of the spoken word in a biennale. And this is happening a lot right now. And also the technique of interviewing the public as an artist interviews the public and becomes more empowered through the public's words. This is happening a lot. I noticed at Art Basel that happened, and it was super interesting. The interplay. Jenna, and I thought of you when I thought of what you wrote. And then we have Steve Holland with us, and I'm going to defer to Bonnie Rubenstein to introduce Steve Holland. Please, Bonnie.
Well, Stephen, I was introduced to Stephen back in 2000, what was that, 22, Stephen? And by a mutual friend. And I was really amazed at his work. I'll let him actually explain what it is, but prior to the work that he's doing now, he had a huge career as a portraitist, specifically with sports teams. And he was hired to do portraits of a lot of teams of like their top their top athletes, and then they would reprint from the portraits that they made, and then they would use them to sell to the fans, etc., and have them autographed. But his work, also entailed portraits of many famous people, including Obama, Muhammad Ali, who I understand he spent like several days with in his home. And so he's just had kind of an exciting life that way. And then at a certain point, he got kind of done with that and decided to create his own story through art. And he does it in a word, he hates the word cartoon, but the imagery is somewhat cartoon-like, but he's got another word for it, and I'll let him tell you what that is. But he does some very interesting work. It's political. It's what he likes and doesn't like when you see his work. He has text on quite a few of the pieces, and he and it's very, very colorful for the most part. But every single one of his pieces requires that you really look at it and understand what he's saying there because it's very complicated. So even though initially it might look cartoon-like, it's got a very deep underlying message in every single one of his canvases. So Steve, I don't know if
And okay, so I have to ask then, Steve, what do you call your work? That Bonnie said that she's sort of saying it's sort of cartoon-like, but you have a different word for it. What is that word?
Maybe somewhat satirical.
Okay, it's satirical, so not cartoon-like, but satirical.
Yeah, that's the basis of it is I use cartoon-like characters. Um, Actually, uh, the main source from my forms, even though they're mostly people, are plants, um, uh, succulents, cactus. They have these incredible forms coming from them, and I'm very intrigued with that. Also, if you ever look at bugs or under a microscope, what looks like just some straight legs is beautiful organic uh, forms and shapes and colors. And so I've been intrigued with that. And that is, even though I like painting with a message and also um, doing a lot of color and using non-abstract forms, the basis of it comes from the abstract forms that I look at in nature.
So did you ever design an album cover?
no, that's
No,
that's I think that's Larry Vigon you're thinking of.
yes.
Oh, I know. I was speaking of Larry, but I'm just thinking of Steve when he's talking about the organic forms and the fact that he's got such a sort of a cult of personality that he was, painting. I was wondering if he ever got into that arena of album. No, okay, it's portrait work. And
They're
Steve,
mostly sold through galleries.
mostly sold through galleries.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And occasionally took commissions.
Okay, got it. Got it. Okay. And I think in the meantime, while I was introducing folks, Kathy Leader has come on,
Oh,
and Kathy's one of our artists. Kathy, are you there? Take yourself off mute. There we go. There's Kathy Leader. Kathy is our South African representative. She's a South African landscape artist, and she actually started that way, but she has a degree in art and art education, and she's been in the US since 1985. And she does mixed media and collage work. And she is fond of decay and beauty intertwined. It's kind of a cool mix. She reconstructs natural materials with the use of collage, fiber, thread, and text. She's influenced by, of course, Andy Goldsworthy and Mark Rothko, and she does natural material, handmade papers, etc. She tends to be interested in things that come from the earth. She's shown in Los Angeles and Santa Barbara. She was at the Venice Family Clinic's annual fundraising show to benefit the unhoused community. She has a process studio, the art process studio in Southern California. And this is a style of teaching and reflection on a creative journey and also internal discovery. She teaches privately. She's created an art program for the homeless. She's a firm believer in the healing power of art, and she does a wonderful blog. Um, also, and are you connected in some way, um, Kathy, with Tom?
Well, I don't know what you said about him having the art process studio took me by surprise. And Tom, is that correct?
No, no. Mine's called a secret plot. Maybe it sounds
Oh,
different.
Okay, so maybe you mixed us up there.
No, I
Okay,
think it
so
actually says that in Tom's work and in his bio, but
it does, it
maybe
says
I
it in
mixed
his
it up. I
bio.
don't know.
Yeah, so maybe we'll just correct that and just say Kathy Leader's been the brainchild behind the artist process studio, but I gotta say, it sounds like you two should get together anyway, and as far as anyway, maybe that's so I mean these are my artists today: Jana Brody, Kathy Leader, Cynthia Martin, Steve Holland, and Tom Pizderka. And Bonnie is going to tell us, please, a little bit about the show and what inspired her. I know I was inspired because, of course, I told you my story about John Baldessari. Um, you know, as far as the word and image together, doesn't get much better, although I'm anxious to see the show. Bonnie, tell me about, first of all, how you got the show together, how you chose the artist that you chose, what was the general theme, what was your process like?
Well, we call the show textual integration, which meaning that the work is not done without words. The words are an integral part of the painting or of the artwork, however that is manifests. I've loved text in art ever since I can remember. And when we started the gallery, I kept saying, let's do a text show, let's do a text show. And finally, we did a text show. And I mean, I love graffiti, and a lot of graffiti has text in it. I mean, I would have been very content to have turned over the walls to artists and let them do all sorts of wonderful things on it. But um, that was not in the that was not in the cards. So we just started to find artists that worked with text, and we have a lot more artists that actually, since we came out with the press release, we've been getting artists saying, well, I do text, we could do another show with an entirely different group of people. But we wanted to work as much as we could with local artists this time because we had been doing artists from out of the area for our first few shows, and it just felt like it was time to incorporate our friends and neighbors. So it was it was a really fun show to put together because everybody's work is so different. You cannot look at this show and see two artists that do anything like each other. For instance, Tom has a large piece, I think it's like 7 feet wide, that's a list of dictators that he
Oh, yeah.
created from about the 1600s on. And if you look at the list, it's pretty amazing because, first of all, there's so many of them. Second of all, he also wrote into the list what the person's original career was. And there was a lot of lawyers, there's teachers, there's a soccer player, and you wonder how they developed from that base to become a dictator of a country. So it just raises more questions than it answers. And then he stopped that in 2019, and we asked him to add what had happened since then, and he found more than 50 dictators since that time. And he did. We asked about Trump, and he said, "Well, Trump's elected, so he's not a dictator, and so he doesn't count." But he says, "We'll see what happens in the next 3 years." So anyway, but every piece in there is so original. Some of them we have seen in the past, but somehow when they are shown in this context, they all look so fresh. And I think it's a wonderful show, and I really hope that people do come out and see it. And one thing that I'm learning about this show is we've done something different than we did before. We really described what the pieces were about. And so there's some text to go with the text. And people are taking the time to really read it and to
Mm.
try to understand what each piece is about, and they ask questions. And so that's a novelty for us. That's really fun. I love this show. I am actually considering traveling it if we can.
Mm.
And maybe adding, new pieces as we go.
I think that'd be fantastic. I just have to ask Tom, you've got the previous occupations of all your dictators. And I'm wondering, because I think I've known that you had a training in either depth psychology or
Oh, I wish.
philosophy. Huh?
I wish. I don't, but I've dabbled.
Okay, but it was philosophy, wasn't it? Don't you
Yeah,
have some, yeah,
yeah,
a
philosophy.
background in philosophy? Okay, so if you were to say, well, okay, all of the occupations that were the commonalities between the dictators, in the two
Mm.
volumes that you've done for the show, I mean, what occurred to me like in a flash was, okay, well, these are the sociopaths and psychopaths of the world, and their previous careers might have been tending towards the grandiose for that very reason. And so, there you go, little armchair analysis. But do you see a commonality in your dictators?
Oh, for sure. I haven't made a graph or anything like that, but there's a kind of a huge majority. I would say probably like 40 to 50, well, let's say like 45% would be military people or like military brass, people that have literally gone to military schools to become military officers, right? So there's a lot of those. In the new list, I would say that's still the case, probably about 40 to 50% of them. There's just conflict all around the world happening at any given moment. And it feels like the people that get pushed to the top, obviously the ones that have, like are really pragmatic. They have a lot of training and also are pushed in that direction. So, and where else are you gonna find those kind of people than like in the militaries of the world? The other part, there's also another commonality among people that kind of go into group situations where they are the figure of power. So they're, lawyers, teachers, and those kind of people that already have like some kind of modicum of power over others. So that's who gets represented quite a lot in that list. And interestingly enough, there's like some outliers there, but like, I still feel like even in those situations, the people that rise through the ranks are the ones that probably would have done so even if they were, in other careers. You know what I mean? Like I think there's just the people with the sharpest elbows just kind of, float to the top just by their like sheer will. And
I
also the
would
system
say,
selects for that, I would say.
okay, so I would say I can buy that totally, that idea of structural patriarchy in
Yeah,
our culture.
yes. Well,
Yeah.
obviously, most, or like I would say like 99.9% of the dictators on the list are men, except, and this is interesting, when Trump took out Maduro, now we have possibly the first female dictator in Belize. But by default.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I love it. I can't wait to see that. Okay, so I've got a question that I want to go like round robin and talk to each of my artists and ask them this main question. So it's two parts, this question. First of all, is this textual integration. It begs the supposition that the image can be caught in words and the words can be caught in an image. And is there a pitfall to that? I can think of a few. Um, then the second part of the question is the kind of show that Bonnie's mounting, which is text and imagery, goes back to at least the mid 20th century to Liechtenstein and Herring, where they are, guerrilla members of a new way of combining text and words. Then you get Warhol, for example, in there. And this is now a new frontier because it's gravitated to people that use text as as guerrilla warfare, some of the taggers. And now it's become a terrific art form. As I was saying, in Art Basel, I saw so many artists interviewing and wanting to hear the spoken word so that they could use that in their own art. And now it's become an art form of in and of itself. And I wondered if you could reflect on that progeny, So the first part of the question is there a trap between the struggle between imagery and words? And I think of like a flash that just came into my mind when you're watching a foreign film in another language and you get the English subtitles, you can hardly see the film anymore because there's the subtitles. And so the text takes over. It becomes the dominant feature in an experience of art. So how do you do that? How do you handle that? And then the second part of the question, or maybe it's another question altogether, how do you see your work fitting into the continuity of the word and the image, going back to like the 1940s and the 50s, for example?
It's interesting.
So let's start, Jana. Can we start with
Right.
you on, yeah,
Sure.
is it too soon to ask you that? Either one. I mean, you can opine on either
Yeah.
question or bring me both.
Well, I appreciate the second question you were talking about with the word and the image, and when my I'm an acrylic painter and I do a lot of subjects and things. And when Bonnie suggested I do this one, it's a take on it's almost like a poster. It's not very high-end art, and to be with Tom and Steve Holland and Cynthia and everyone is like, I do art, but the piece that I created was more of a message or more of a graffiti piece, and it's speaking about how not to speak to a deaf person. So it's taking the imagery and putting like a play on it. So like the caption that says, don't put your hand in front of the face, but half of the words are taken away by the hand in front of the words. So it's kind of an interesting play and it's kind of an educational piece. But I appreciate, you talking about Herring and Warhol and, more poster type art in the history of art. And so I'm like, okay, I'll feel more better about my piece that it's not so artistically, in vain. It's more of that pop art poster style.
What's so interesting, I love what you just said. It's very poetic, it's almost like what I was thinking of asking, you know, um, the hand in front of the mouth is the wrong way to speak to a deaf person. So you're blocking the words with an image.
Correct.
Yeah. So that's kind of what I was driving at in that question. Is the image ever blocked by the words, or are the words ever blocking an image in a work? And you as an artist, have you struggled with that, saying, okay, this is too dominant, this is not dominant enough, or this isn't what I was wanting to portray? Have you done that, Jana?
Not so much. One of the things that you touched on in my intro was the painted affirmations. So I like to work with people who aren't, traditionally artists. And, I always tell them that what we're creating is more like a stained glass of words, something very hard to read. Like I wrap the words around, they continue from one line into the next line. And it's so every time you look at it, you have to really look at it to figure out what the affirmation or the song lyric or the quote that you selected.
And what do
So
you call that affirmation? Something?
yeah, painted affirmations.
Painted affirmations.
Yeah,
Okay.
because I always tease, you go to Ross or Walmart or something, and you see something that says happy life, and people buy it. And then you look at it 10 times and you don't ever see it again, even the meaning of happy life, to me anyway.
You
So
know what I can't stand? I get to say, I hope my sister-in-law is not listening to this. She's in New York, so I doubt she would. But her house, she has a lake house, and her house, every room has something like, in this house, we love each other. And then there'd be the next room saying, live, love, laugh. And in the next room would say, in this house, we have a boat that is this, blah, 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 and it's happy and it's da, da, da. And I mean, even ad nauseum on the back like if you're a guy and you're peeing in the toilet, you can actually see these big lines of what life should be like in that house. And it's like, oh my God, people buy this, they frame it, they put it on walls, and they're in my family.
And I
I
agree
mean,
that it's like you can only see it or get that empathetic, feeling from that the first time you read it, really. So when it's hanging in your house and you see it 10 million times, it loses its meaning.
Yeah.
Can I,
isn't that interesting? It really does. And that's what I'm saying, this image and words fighting together. Richard's giving us a sign we got to go to. It'll be a quick break. And then when we get back from the break, I want to hear what Steve has to say about this. And either you can address the heritage part of my question, Steve, how your work fits into the general heritage of written spoken word, written and visual word, or you could talk to me about how the text and the image fight for you sometimes, and who comes out on top in the end. Love to hear that. Okay, Rich, let's go to quick break. So he's just shutting us off for 2 seconds, and then we'll jump back in. And by the way, when this airs, Richard's gonna edit this a little bit and put music to it, and it'll be a little bit more
Polished.
cohesive.
Yeah. Here we go.
And Richard, you'll share the link with us
Oh
separately?
yeah,
Elizabeth will, yes.
I will. Yeah,
Here we go.
absolutely.
yeah, can I say one thing about Jana's piece?
Yeah.
I mean, she was saying that, she was kind of saying that she wasn't really an artist to be in this group of artists.
Wait. Richard, plug
Yep.
us in. This is
I'm gonna
sounding
count you
interesting.
down
Yep.
in 3,
Okay.
2, 1. You are live.
Thank you, Jana, for that comment on your work. And Bonnie, during that little talk you were giving me, was thinking. I could see. Bonnie, your reaction.
Well, my reaction was Jana was like feeling, I don't know how she was feeling, but she was saying, that she was in a group of artists that, work as full-time artists, and maybe she was not necessarily in that category, but her piece, that's the piece that everybody gravitates to. It's so interesting.
Yay! Thanks for telling me.
And then we're having the poets come and do poems to the art through George Yachison. He's the Santa Barbara Poet Laureate, and he's organizing all this. And that was the first piece that was stolen, that was chosen, that was chosen by one of the poets to write to. So it's resonating with people, the message that she put out there.
That's fantastic, and the fact it was stolen is even better. It, so that's wonderful. Steve, reflect for me on the fight between the visual image and the words, if there is such a thing in your work, or reflect for me on how your work fits into the art historical timeline.
Well, I
Or both.
hadn't really thought much about that until your question. But the painting that I have in the show is a painting of Samson and Delilah. And so it made me think that you talked about the history, and you went back to Herring and Warhol, and it made me think about the early Bibles were all painted visually. For me, being a visual artist, it is all about the visuals that matter most. I always feel if I wasn't a painter, I would be a poster artist, because I love I love graphic arts and bold graphics and things like that. So the if you think about music, think about Bob Dylan and his music and his words, or the Beatles and his music and their words. They all work together. And it's all about the music. And otherwise he'd just be a poet instead of a
Yeah.
musician. And so uh, I I'm a visual artist. That's my particular preference. So that's always the words have to fit in there. Um, I'm actually not really good at writing or anything, so most of if I do put words in it, they're taken from things that I've read elsewhere that I really feel fit the situation that what I'm painting and add to it. You know, it's it always is a cohesive mix and you have to uh when you're making anything artistically in any field, you're always mixing in a whole lot of stuff. You're mixing in your own freedom, you're mixing in the message you might want to get across, you're mixing the visual, the story you want to tell, and they all have to work together and fit and gel. And it's almost like poetry putting them together. You can't even figure it out. It just has to kind of happen.
It's interesting you should mention the illuminated manuscripts from the 12th century. Um, and the idea that the most of the people that, got a hold of those, I'm thinking of the Book of Kells, for example, most they're usually people that could read Latin, for example. But for the people that didn't grasp the written word, there was a running illustration, especially in the frontispiece. And I think that that intrigues me greatly, that the way that the word and the image came together in the medieval times. I'm so glad you brought that up. And I love what you said about you're not sure how the mix comes together, but you kind of know it when it comes together. And the analogy of music and poem. I love that. I think that's brilliant.
And a little bit of a stretch, these days is even children's books. Usually the writing is still has to work as part of something. Um, Comic strips, you know, the words in the comic strips are also visually fitting, the where the balloons go.
Uh-huh.
All has to work because what you're looking at is a visual thing. You're not listening to something. Music.
Interesting. That's interesting. That's very, very true. Um, did Kathy leave us? Is Kathy still here?
She's there.
Yes, I'm here.
Kathy, okay, Kathy, I'd love for you to talk to me about the intermix in your work between text and image.
Yeah, I think just on the subject, the subject of mixing the two, this is not to do with my work necessarily, but I think about Japanese calligraphy
Oh, yes, yes.
as being, a letter, a word, and a visual image, right? So it's not so out of the blue, this whole integration. And I think that my work, in a way, I feel like I use words or text in two different ways. One is using the words as visual marks, almost like the Japanese calligraphy kind of thing, where the word and the letter become a compositional, interesting feature, whether it's kind of a contrast to in my case, in my pieces, it's a real contrast because I've combined figurative work with words, and the organic shapes of the figures are juxtaposed against the very stenciled kind of did you disappear? Oh, you're there. Word
Yeah, I'm here.
So, so I kind of, I like that contrast, and I like the word as a visual mark. But also in a lot of my work, the words enhance the image so that whoever's looking at it, there's a deeper context that I'm referring to that isn't necessarily obvious in the figure that I've composed. So the words are sort of like flowing underneath the figure to give you an extra layer of meaning and depth to the figure.
Kathy, can you explain what your pieces are that are in the gallery? Because I think that they're sensational.
So the two pieces that are in there are basically old player piano rolls that are used as a background for the figure to go onto. And the words of the player piano roll are read from the bottom up. And so the words almost go into the figure, because the figure's higher up on the piece. I actually have one here. And they refer to a particular moment in my life where those words really resonated with my own personal experience at the time. Yeah.
What was
So,
that time?
what was the time? Well, one was a breakup of a relationship. And yeah, that was pretty useful at the time for keeping me from crying all the time. I just created all the time. So
Mm.
that was powerful. And the other one was called Everyone is Learning How to Do It. And that was sort of afterwards when I was sort of learning how to be. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's interesting, the great emotional depths that you get from despair. It's like, okay, that it's either this or where's the nearest bridge? So, yeah, I get it. Cynthia, did I ask you the same question? What's your thoughts?
Well, the text and image have been present in my art practically all my life since I was writing stories when I was 7 years old and putting the words right on the page. Another theme with my art has been the environment, and the pieces I have in the show combine both. I like the question though, because when I have used text in my art, I've always made it a little bit hard to find in a way. And I will describe the two I have in Bonnie's show. One, they're both large, cloudy skies. And at the time I did them, I was painting large, cloudy skies and also being fascinated with ads out of magazines. So I had a collection of those, and one day I decided to combine them. And so before I painted the landscape, I glued the letters on the canvas, and then with this dark cloud over them, it makes them hard to read. One is called "The Future Has Unlimited Possibilities." The other one is called "Come Feel the Magic." And one that Bonnie sold in this series at the Palm Springs Art Fair was called Secrets of Hollywood. And it was a large, very, very smoggy looking cloudy
It was
sky.
a what now? Say again, Cynthia. It was a large.
very smoggy oil painting of clouds, but the letters.
I didn't catch the adjective, a very something,
Oh.
oil paint.
Oh, Secrets of Hollywood.
And, but
That
it's
was,
what
but-
kind of
She said it was smoggy. It looked like,
yeah, right.
smoggy, smoggy, foggy. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
I thought you said snobby.
Oh, no.
It's like, okay, I get it.
But yeah, I've always been fascinated with artists that use text, and admired Jenny Holzer and Barbara Kruger, Ed Ruscha, of course, and going back, yes, to Andy Warhol, which brings up the fact that we have another artist in our show, Salvador Mateo, has a couple of takes on Andy Warhol's soup cans. So Bonnie can say more about that, but that's his pieces are really fascinating collages. So I always want to combine or, sort of hide, as I said, hide the text in the image. And that goes back to what Jana was saying too. So
Well,
does that answer your question?
It does. It's fascinating. And I just want to know, I was in a different neighborhood at the time, but I used to see you run every morning. Do you still do that? Do you still run?
I walk.
You walk, okay.
I
Okay.
walk, yes.
Okay, excellent. Well, I'm glad to hear it. I'm afraid to ask Tom the same question because I know that I see you, Tom. So, so I wonder if you would opine on either those two questions or maybe both. I mean, how do words fight for you? How do your images fight amongst words? How do you put your work in the perspective of, like we talked about, Liechtenstein, Herring, Rouchet, Kruger, the people that, came before you? How do you put yourself in that? And is that a Ray Strong behind you, by the way?
Oh, it's not. It looks like one, but it's
It
actually.
does. I know. I was like, that can't be Tom's.
Um, well, but to answer your question, I mean, okay, it wouldn't be me if I wasn't gonna take this into some kind of like deep, dark, depressing hole. So I'm thinking, at least for me, right? Like the idea of text, especially in today's world when you're constantly being reminded, just the idea of like how little people read, right? Like, and I mean like read like books and literature and things like that. I mean, we're doing a ton of reading all the time. You're like scrolling on Instagram all the time. You're being bombarded by words, but they're like these just disjointed pieces of information that don't really mean anything. I mean, like most people when they do any kind of reading nowadays, seems to me like they're just like reading Trump's tweets and that's kind of it. And everybody just gets kind of angry and and then that's kind of it. But like real reading, depth, kind of like depth reading or like reading for like beyond what's on the page, that doesn't really get done anymore. So it's kind of ironic that we're involved still to this day with like artwork that deals with text because that's also working against the grain of like the algorithm, where if you put anything on Instagram now, it's immediately just put into a deep dark hole where of like no one's ever going to see it because if it's got words in it, it's just going to get completely throttled because if there's no face in it, if some is not blowing up, then basically it doesn't exist, right? So it's kind of weird. Art already is fighting for its own space because there's just like so much art even now with like AI slop and all that. But and then you introduce a textual element into it. And in my own case, I'm also doing black and white. This is like a double whammy. Like no one wants to see anything in black and white. No one wants to read anything. So my fight actually is more about getting enough people interested in the philosophical end of things and bring them in that way so that because for me the word of mouth is sort of how I live and breathe. I feel like that's the best way to get people interested in anything. Oh, have you seen this? Have you heard about that? So I approach the things that I do and the things that I'm interested in through that perspective. I like my network of people when we talk about things, oh, have you seen this latest video? Have you read this latest book or things like that? I'm really old school in that sense. Like I mean I still do the things. I still do the YouTube algos. Like they're still vaulting things at me, but I'm being really selective and picky about them. But I put way more weight into what someone I know, and especially someone I know really well, is tells me that I should look at. And if it's a book or if it's a movie or whatever it is, then I just take that with way much more weight. So for me, the kind of works that I'm really interested in, and if they are textual, it kind of it's both. I mean, I like I read a lot, and in terms of artworks, I'm really into conceptual work. So and conceptual work that text is kind of a given. You kind of have to read a lot just to even get into the work. But I was really inspired by other types of work that are text based, but they're kind of also visually based. And my work with text has more to do with lists than anything else. I'm kind of a neurotic list maker. So any work that I see that utilizes really similar elements, I like for my work anyway, the work of Walid Rod was like a really, really big um, influence in this field. So in the 80s, he did a whole series of works where he was documenting the Lebanese Civil War. And he did this one where basically he was going out and documenting where all of the car bombs that had been detonated during the Civil War had uh, not the cars themselves, but the motors, because like when a car explodes, it's just kind of, like just explodes, but like the motor itself gets launched at somewhere in
Wow.
space. And he was documenting where the motor landed, and he would like put a coordinate on it, and then that would be a document, and there was like more than 3,000 of these. So it's a list of basically like coordinates or locations of where the motors of these exploded car bombs have landed during the war. So that's the kind of thing that I like, that I always look for, and that's how I approach the things that I make, because I think that once you know the secret, because um if that piece is in front of you, like the dictators list is in front of you, and you really don't know most of the story, your way in is maybe someone tells you, or you kind of deduce from it what it actually is or what it's about. So you wouldn't know. Like I don't actually say outright that, oh, this list is about
Psychopaths, for
yeah,
example. Yeah.
psychopaths or what they did before they became dictators. But if you spend just a little bit of time looking at it and reading for the reference for the textual references, and like kind of like quote like read between the lines, you'll get it. And I think that experience is way more rewarding in the end.
So
So
I have two things to say. And then first of all, I think that's fantastic. And you made me think of two things that have recently happened in my life. So I am reading some very old James Michener historical tomes, huge novels, Centennial and Chesapeake and some of these very, and my philosophy is if someone leaves a book on a outside as I'm walking the dog, if I see a book there, it's it's required reading, no matter what I find in my path. And if it's a book and it's in my path, I will read it because it's somehow divinely placed. And then there was a Michener book there. Yeah, Richard, I see you. So there's a Michener book there. And he describes somebody in the old world who's witnessing the new world, and this is his quotes, not mine, coming in a great big galleon ship. And he's saying, and there were sails, and there were billows, and there were flashes of gold, and there were rattles of change, and he goes on with all these ands. And I thought, let me plug that into ChatGPT and see if they clean up that sentence. All these beautiful ands that build upon each other. And it turns out ChatGPT, he saw gold, comma, he saw silver, comma, he saw billows, comma. And it's like, that is not, I mean, that's not the poetry, but so that was first. Second thing you made me think of, 15th and 16th century maps, where the image is narrative but imaginative. So there's really no such thing as a sea creature with a tail and a goat's head and blah blah. But they're descriptive of some space. Is it inner space? Is it outer space? It's both. And I'm thinking when I read that Bonnie was doing this show about textual integration, that's such a huge marker, symbolic markers. Textual integration are these ancient maps, and I just happen to have a collector, and I'm an appraiser. I happen to have a collector who had a premier collection of 15th and 16th century early maps. And it was just like, you don't even need to pay me. I love it. I'm going to write about it and just love it to death. Love that. And you made me think about that, Tom. Before we go, Richard's giving us a sign. We've got to go. Bonnie, tell us how to see the show, where to see the show, and the
Okay.
times.
I'm glad you're giving me an opportunity to plug it a little bit.
Absolutely.
I also want to say that my partner, Irene Chan, couldn't be here today, but she's going to be in the gallery this weekend. We are in the Palm Lofts of Carpinteria, which is near the beach on Palm Avenue, and we're in Unit B3 in the B building. Open only on weekends in general, but open whenever anybody wants to visit. All they have to do is call, because we both live in the complex. We're right there. So yeah, the show is on until the end of May. And on May 14th, we're going to have the poetry reading by the poets that George Atchison is collecting, talking about the various pieces of art. And that's going to be a lot of fun. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that, Irene just did a beautiful job of identifying talking about each piece and, and labeling it. And it was, it was her great work she did.
So I want to thank our artists, Jana Brody, Kathy Leader, Cynthia Martin, Tom Pizderica, and Steve Holland for coming along and talking about their works that are in the show called Textual Integration. And by the way, if you get a chance, Bonnie, give us the phone number I can give it. It's 805-576-6152, 576-621-52. You can talk to either Irene or Bonnie and get an appointment for yourself just to go by yourself and meet one of the curators, Bonnie or Irene. They're so personable, and look at the work and have a field day. Just look at the work so treat yourself to that. And also on the poetry reading is it the 4th you said?
The 14th,
14th.
It's a Thursday night at 7 o'clock.
Okay.
14th
And
of
thank
May.
you all of my artists there and some of my old friends, Cynthia and Tom, that I've known forever. And thank you for being with me, and my new friends, Kathy and Steve. And also Jana, thank you for being with me. And I can't wait to see your work hanging in Bonnie's gallery. That's Rubenstein Chan in the Palm Lofts in Carpinteria. Thank you, guys.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
All right, Richard. So okay. So I'm gonna send Bonnie the recording of this interview, and then Richard and I have an agreement with the studio that instead of any kind of remuneration for us, we're allowed to send my artists and the gallerist, etc., the shows, and Bonnie and you guys can use it however you want. So let's say you've got a really cool thing that you said and you're like, wow, that was a work of genius. Why did I say that? How did I say that? But I like that I said it. So you can cut and paste that and use that, however you want. It's Richard and I, give you total permission, and use the interview however you want. And Richard was saying the interviews, it's going to be live 10 o'clock on AM FM, which is, AM FM radio 1290 on the AM dial. And I forget what it is on the FM dial. But anyway, it runs, and you'll have a recording of the whole interview. You just won't have it, I don't think. Will they have it with music by the time you give it to me, Richard? Oh, I think Richard signed
As
up.
far as the
You may or may
as
not
the-
have Richard's edited versions, but however it is.
As far as the video is concerned, I don't do anything with that. With the audio, yes, it will have music in its entirety.
But when you send it to me and I send it to my
Yeah.
artist, will it have music?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Good. Good. It'll be a nicer version than today, and
This
it'll play on Friday night, Sunday a couple of times, so it'll have 4 airings, and hopefully we'll get some folks in that show because it's such a cool idea. I mean, I can think of so many reasons that it's so important right now, especially it's like, please, it's all the times that I use ChatGPT to clean something up. It's never me.
Yeah,
Mhm.
right.
And it just kills me. It's never me. It's like, where did I go? I disappeared totally,
Like, hey,
and it's nuts.
hey,
Anyway,
Conrad.
thank you guys. I'll send this to you as soon as Richard's done.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Bonnie. Thanks for
Thank
bringing this
you.
to my attention.
Right.
Sure.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.